Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome again to Changing the Questions. My name is Paul Laporte. Joining me once again, my special guest hosts, CJ Scott the Wolf, a.k.a. Scott Fellows.
Hello.
The Savageable Salmon.
Yes!
David Ravage. The Savage
The
David
solely
Ravage.
salmon man.
The Savage David Ravage. The Salmon David Ravage. We're just gonna, by the end of the show, you're gonna be a completely different guy.
It'll happen. Let's book it. Let's book it.
David Ravage, a.k.a. Evan Fellows.
How you doing?
And we are ending our little journey here, our little block, with another best of show. But this one is the one that you two specifically have been dreading.
Yeah, I'm so not ready for this.
It's been easy for me. I already have my answer.
Oh, of course you fucking do. You knew what the question was
I'm gonna
weeks ago.
bullshit my way through this so
I
hard.
told you to send me the questions ahead of time so I could research. He tells me 10 minutes before we get on fucking mic.
All right. So the question that we're going to be answering today that you guys have been dreading since this whole block of recordings is...
Not the part where I had to go on and tell everybody about my experiences in wrestling so they could all go, what the fuck's this guy ever done?
No,
No, not that part.
Nothing compared.
I'm used to being ridiculed. That's not a problem.
All right. The question we're going to be answering on this episode is, what is the best year in professional wrestling? Okay, now to preface this whole episode, we are going to qualify a year as like a rough 2-year swing. So I really don't want people like coming in and saying like, if somebody picks like 1998, being like, that happened in December of 97. Fuck you, sir. like we're gonna have some leeway in the time. The year is just gonna kind of represent really like roughly a 2-year span in which things may have happened. So we're gonna be a little bit loose with that, but it's really kind of more of a general but short time period. So that's gonna be the rules for this. Scott, let's start with you.
I've started first every episode. I'm
Okay,
actually
Evan,
going to let
let's
Evan start.
Okay, so for
Because he
those
has
of
an
you that
answer.
don't know, my favorite year is 2007. That's not true at all, because that produced the worst SmackDown versus Raw game I've ever played in my life.
And that's how we're basing this.
Yes. It was literally the shittiest.
Are you
but-
sure? Because last year's was pretty bad.
Last year's was god awful, but let's be honest, that the fucking Extreme Rules one with CM Punk and all that was just so bad. But actually, I'm actually going to go with a real year. The year before was 2006.
All years are real, technically.
fuck you.
2007, because I had my first wrestling match.
Yes.
Okay, so 2006 is the year.
2006.
Okay.
I think it was just a really good year. I know Super Cena was starting. That was when he really started to reign supreme, and people were getting sick of him, and everybody
Getting sick of him 9 years ago.
Yeah.
What are they now?
But I digress.
Nonplussed.
Thinking about it this way, he was a really good person to have. Someone that could be the new face of the company, and alongside that, there was Kurt Angle was still in the WWE, and Edge and all Kurt Angle.
2006. Was the SmackDown 6 around that time? Or was that before?
I'm not sure.
No,
I think it was before.
Okay.
Yeah, there was SmackDown vs. Raw 2006.
That's not what I meant, but...
Fuck you. Anyways, I actually got the privilege to go to New Year's Revolution in Albany, and I distinctly remember going to that show and watching Edge cash in on John Cena for the peering out as the big heel of the
The
company.
whole goddamn business... The whole business just lost... Business. The whole building lost their fucking mind at that.
insane.
It was the first Money in the Bank cash-in. We were all there.
Yes, yeah. That shit was so hot.
Even her over in the background there.
Yes,
But,
and I very distinctly remember...
I distinctly remember Paul having to sit way the hell away from the rest of us.
Yes,
Yes.
that sucked. But I remember walking out of that, what was it, the Pepsi Arena at the
Yes.
time?
No, yes, it
yes,
still was.
It wasn't the Pepsi, or it wasn't the Knickerbocker, and it wasn't the Times Union yet.
Yeah, so it was so walking out of the Pepsi Arena at the time, and the people walking out, there was a literal buzz.
Oh,
It was people, like everybody talking, like, oh my god, like I like really, and I had been to dozens of shows at that point of varying degrees of size. I never experienced anything like that. People left that arena knowing that they saw something special, because that was the first Money in the Bank cash-in.
Yep.
Nobody even considered that you could do it like that, which WWE did a great job of kind
Absolutely.
of downplaying that and then using it in that way. And you could certainly make the argument that the Money in the Bank trope has overstayed its welcome, but boy, I think one of the reasons that it's still around is because it got started so strongly.
Yeah, it was definitely. We're basing our entire year off of one match at this point.
Well, let's be honest. That
match took place in January of that year.
It literally made my year. That's all that matters. Like, I can't think of any other year that comes to mind when I'm like, oh, well, I really like this happening, or I really like this happening. It was just that one moment where I was like, wow.
Yeah, and that's another important thing to point out is that the best year in wrestling can mean so many different things. Like,
Absolutely.
it does not have to be like, what were the best wrestling matches, or what was the best story. Like, it can be like, there were so many justifiable reasons. That's one of the reasons I wanted this question for the show.
Let's be honest, too. The crowd was so hot for Angle. Like, he
Oh, yeah.
he did the promo beforehand
my
where
God.
he literally did his best to offend everybody. Like, where I can't do it as well as you can.
Oh,
like,
my
I
God.
can't go through the whole
So
thing.
we're in Albany, the capital of New York, which has a certain population. And Kurt Angle, in a live televised promotion, says that he's not a fan of the black people.
He says that, he goes, my favorite country would be France. And then he goes, if there was anybody I could ever go back in a time and make tap out, it would have to be Jesus. That being said, I can say all these things, and this crowd will still cheer for me, because they know I am the best wrestler here. And the crowd went nuts. That shit
Because he was right.
He's right.
Because
Yes.
you looked at the other people in that match, and it was almost... you go into it originally thinking...
Wasn't
why
Chris
the-
Masters in that match?
Yes. Why the hell did I buy a ticket to this? Because you're looking at the main event going, here's this Elimination Chamber. Chris Masters and Carlito.
Oh, man.
John Cena. Kurt Angle. Michaels was in it, wasn't he?
Yes.
Yep.
Now, who the hell was the sixth guy? Well, that was important then, clearly.
Hunter?
Yeah, nobody
No,
remembers.
it wasn't
The
Triple H.
match itself wasn't that important, although the match wasn't bad.
No, it wasn't.
Carlito held up his end. He did
Yeah.
good.
Yep.
You know,
But, like, that match and that show itself just gave me such a feel. Like, it was just so good to watch, you know?
Yeah. Yep.
any other standout moments from
2006.
the 2006 period?
Not really, man.
Okay, that's fair.
like my brother had said,
I mean-
after that, like shortly
3 weeks
thereafter-
later, Cena wins the title back, and
Yeah.
we're going back to
Edge,
hell.
Oh, yeah.
Edge lost the belt.
But it is also important to point out, 2006, you were how old?
I was 16.
So, I mean, that's a lot of times for a lot of people when they think of like the best time in wrestling.
Actually,
the
no,
best
I must have
period.
been. I had to have been 15 since it was in January.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
So for a lot of people, that's around the time.
Yeah.
You know, for
that's
me,
when
that
you're
was-
you make your decision on how you feel about wrestling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because when you're a kid, you're gonna love it because it's a spectacle. But as you get older, you're going to, there's gonna be people going, "Oh, you watch wrestling? That's." Yeah, I can't tell you how many times in my 34 years that I've had to have people go, "Oh, wrestling? What the?" And I'm a wrestler now.
Yeah.
Like, I've got posters with my face on them, and they're going, "Oh, wrestling's fake." I'm like, does my
Bruh.
dislocated knee look fake to you?
So, but like I said, I think that's important because that's around the time where,
Yeah.
if you pick like your favorite time in wrestling, for a lot of people, it is around that time when you're,
Right.
13 through 16. For me, that was, around the time of the Attitude Era. That was the same thing. So that's
I know it's obviously not the best year in wrestling, but to me, it really feels
right.
like it is.
Exactly. Absolutely.
So that's how I feel about that. I'm going to pass it along to my brother. What do you have to say?
All right. Well, I don't know. You might think this is kind of a cop-out, but I'm going to say 2015.
God damn it!
Ha-ha! Beat you
God
to
damn
it. Beat you to it.
Okay, well, since we clearly both have the pick of 2015, let's discuss why we think that this is the best year. And like I was mentioning to you guys before, I actually got into an argument with this in a wrestling group on Facebook that broke down to me getting banned from the group. So about this, and people were very adamant against it, mainly because it's just a lot of people who hate Roman Reigns or something. But why do you think 2015 is the best year in wrestling when, on the surface, not a lot of notable, really good wrestling happened, and there's been a lot of problems with a lot of mainstream wrestling?
Oh, of course, absolutely. Well, one of the main reasons is when I say 2015, I mean now. I mean currently. I think wrestling it's probably never going to be the boom that it used to be. You're never going to get back to, WrestleMania 3 where there were 93,000 people there, but they were all there because, oh my God, wrestling.
Yeah.
As opposed to, oh my God, social event of the year.
Yes. That's a really good way of putting that.
Right. So I just think that wrestling is at this point now, you've mentioned it before, that WWE has technically the best roster they've had ever. Mm-hmm. I can't think of a bad wrestler on their roster. Now, there are people I'm like, I don't really want to watch him.
Tamina.
I don't want to watch Tamina. I don't want to watch him, is what I said. But yeah, okay,
Tamina.
We're going to go with Tamina. I'm not going to like the way they're being booked or anything like that, but they've got fantastic talkers. They've got fantastic workers. They've got people who are both, that's very rare in WWE.
That's very rare, and they have like half a dozen of them.
Yeah, they've got tons of guys who can do everything. Mm-hmm. And kind of like I mentioned the SmackDown 6 earlier, that was 6 guys back in the day on SmackDown who they built their entire show around. WWE has so many people they can do that with now. They need to not do it with John Cena.
The SmackDown 6 was it Kurt Angle, Undertaker?
Kurt Angle, Edge, Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit. Chris Benoit.
Hey, they acknowledge him now.
Jesus. That's going to be a subject for another time. Let's.
Yeah.
I thought Undertaker was in there. Undertaker was on SmackDown.
Undertaker
he was
was
like
on
the big guy
SmackDown.
who signed his
It wasn't Triple H though. Might have been Lesnar.
Lesnar was on that, so it could have been
right.
him. No.
But they had 6 guys who weren't. Well, it probably wasn't Lesnar or Taker though. Weren't necessarily your main event guys, but they were the guys who carried the show. They were the guys that Paul Heyman was writing the show at the time, and he was.
Edge was one of them, I think.
Yes, I said Edge. Might have been Christian.
Could have been.
Because Christian.
Did you mention Jericho?
Jericho probably was Jericho. But it was clearly we know who the top 4 were,
right?
But the extra 2, and those were guys that he was able to build great stories around great wrestling with great talkers, and people that SmackDown was the show. Raw has always been the flagship show, but Raw is always kind of bogged down with a lot of crap, especially on 3-hour Raws now, which not a good thing.
No,
but that's what they're doing because money, money, money.
And we talked about that in our very first episode, as a matter of fact.
Absolutely. So, right now we're on WWE. There's so much going on. We mentioned Lucha Underground in a previous podcast. Lucha Underground was amazing. Lucha Underground made wrestling fun again.
Yes.
You mentioned Chikara. Chikara's having good years. Pro Wrestling Guerrilla. Indie wrestling is hot. Now, 2CW closed down, unfortunately.
Yes.
But
even in them, there is there's Excite Pro Wrestling, which is coming out of them basically, and then there will be others that will open up out of that too. And that's the thing. And you're probably maybe you were going to get to this, but saying 2015 was a bad year for professional wrestling is like saying that 2015 is a bad year for music or movies or TV, and that like maybe if your scope of watching is what you can flip through television channels and find, maybe you're right. But if you put even the most cursory amount of work into finding something, you can find anything. New Japan, NJPW World launched either late 2014 or early 2015. So now you can watch basically every prominent New Japan show for $9 a month.
Have they gotten around to an English translation yet?
They haven't for most of their stuff. It's a pretty easy process to sign up for, but they still don't have English commentary, unfortunately.
I'm not worried about the commentary. I'm just, I'd like to sign up.
Google Translate will do wonders for you. And there's also a few pages. Like, it's really not very difficult at all. So you have New Japan World. You have just fucking YouTube. I mean, like, just
Wrestle Kingdom.
Yeah.
Wrestle Kingdom was an amazing show.
Right, exactly. But I'm saying just in terms of accessibility, and yeah, not even just the wrestling. Like the wrestling has obviously been very good, and it's not just very good, but it's also very easy to find. This is independent promotions now are as good as things were back when the territory still existed in the 70s and 80s, except the difference is you can fucking see them all. Like, you can watch all of them.
Yes.
When you, back in the territories, you lived in the Midwest, you saw what was in the Midwest, and that's it. You lived in New York, you saw what was in the tri-state area, maybe, and that's it. You live anywhere now, and you can see stuff in Midwest, Florida, New York, Philadelphia, Boston, California,
Canada.
Mexico, Canada, Japan. It doesn't
Germany.
matter. Germany, England, Scotland. You can see all of these things,
Australia.
all of these places, and we've talked a couple different times about professional wrestling being a art form, being a medium of art, in similar to ways in which comics are a medium and movies are a medium. Professional wrestling isn't a work of art, isn't an art piece, it is an art form. It is a way to deliver art.
Of course.
And if you are willing to put in just the slightest amount of work in this modern age, you will be able to find what you like.
Oh, absolutely.
Whether it's comedy, whether it's super serious, whether it's garbage wrestling, blood and guts, you will find it easily.
Ultra violence, great technical wrestling.
Yes.
Like you said, comedy. There's so many different genres of wrestling. You can barely scratch the surface because you can find good technical comedy. You can crossbreed that
Yes.
stuff. Yeah, it's harder to find, but you can find technical hardcore.
Yes.
You absolutely can. So whatever floats your boat for wrestling, now is the time where you can find it. And I don't see that going away. I don't see, as we go forward, us losing that. Because, Lucha Underground got signed to a second season. 2CW closed, but most promotions that you've ever heard of, PWG or your CZW or your Ring of Honor or even TNA's not under the fucking bus yet.
Yeah, I mean they're the cockroach of professional wrestling that you keep thinking that they're going to die, but they have a show in Tokyo in a month. They just keep finding ways to survive. There is really something for everybody: men's wrestling, women's wrestling, intergender, everything.
There are multiple female-only promotions.
Yes,
Could you have imagined that 10 years ago?
exactly. Yeah.
That's insane 10 years ago.
There's multiple ones in this area, in this region. There are 2 to 3, let alone the U.S., let alone the world. I mean, like I said, last night we were all huddled around my laptop watching a match that took place on December 23rd from Stardom, which is a women's wrestling promotion in Japan. That's just the sort of environment that we live in now, where we can find those things. And like I said, I think for people who like pro wrestling but don't love pro wrestling, they're going to crap on this year, the smaller time they're going to look back to. And I want to get into in a little bit the specific year that gets mentioned all the time when this gets brought up. But I think that if you're somebody who is a real true wrestling fan who has followed it for a long time, and that was the comment I got from people when I mentioned 2015 was my favorite year, was, oh, you must have just started watching wrestling this year.
No.
No, that's not the case at all.
Not even remotely.
Not even the slightest. It's just a thing of, like, if you really love professional wrestling and want to appreciate it in all its different forms, this is absolutely the best time for you just because it is so accessible.
Absolutely.
Now,
what do people say? What do they say, 96?
The year that is the most popular, the most commented that I've seen is 1998.
98, okay.
What do you guys think about that as an answer? Now, obviously, this is at the height of the Stone Cold Austin McMahon stuff. Mick Foley, Undertaker.
Even over on WCW, Goldberg was hot.
Yes.
1998 was actually when I got back into watching wrestling. And it wasn't even a situation that I didn't want to watch wrestling. It was simply a situation of I couldn't watch wrestling at the time. So, again, back on what we were just saying, this time now where you can find wrestling anywhere is great if you're a wrestling fan. Or if you're someone who used to be a wrestling fan. Because that was me. I was, I grew up out in the woods in a small town here in upstate New York. And we didn't have cable. There was no cable. So the only time I got to see any wrestling was if I rented WrestleMania tapes from fucking 8 years before from the video store, or if I on occasion was able to find Superstars playing on Saturday morning on Fox. So 1998 was when we moved to an area that had cable. And I was able to start watching wrestling again. And very few people will admit this. I was a WCW fan, not a WWF fan.
Absolutely.
So I watched, and what pulled me in for WCW was the Cruiserweight Wrestling.
Oh, yes.
Wrestling was the most amazing thing I'd ever seen in my life. Because, again, I'm watching Like the most recent shit I'd seen was WrestleMania 10.
Yeah, which
So-
cruiserweight wrestling was Bret Hart, or was Bret Hart and Owen Hart. That was basically as close to cruiserweight as you got.
Right. So I'm looking, I see Rey Mysterio wrestling Billy Kidman. I see Dean Malenko, Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero, Chris Jericho, Juventud, Psychosis, Super Calo.
Yeah, and we mentioned earlier with Evan's pick of 2006 as, the year when you're young and you just kind of get into it. For me, that year was 1996. For the same reason, I started flipping over to Nitro after having watched WWF my whole life, and I saw specifically Dean Malenko and Rey Mysterio, their feud during the summer of 1996, where they wrestle about every week, and they would just, like, it seemed like flagrant in the way that they were just flipping off the rest of the card with the things that they were doing. Like, no, the people who came before us, you're going to forget everything they did, and you're not going to care about anything anyone else is going to do after us. We don't care. And that was it to me. And that was, like, the point where, like you said, there comes a point in every lifelong wrestling fan's journey where you go from, just cheering the good guys and booing the bad guys and just kind of going along with the story and, believing the fairy tale to going, holy shit, I know Santa Claus isn't real anymore, but I don't care because the reality is more impressive than the fantasy. And for me, that was 96. And that's the same way. And carrying in through 98, yeah, that was an incredibly hot period of time. And you had the good work of the cruiserweights being done. You had... NWO was still at its zenith there. Goldberg was coming in. There was a lot of good stuff in WCW. There was a lot of good stuff in WWF. And the fact that they were going against each other made each one want to push each other higher. Mm-hmm. And I'm one of those people who looks back on that time and goes, this wasn't as good as you all thought, but nonetheless, it's still very good.
Oh, yes.
To say it's not as good as you thought it was, that's just because you think it's the best thing that's ever happened.
Right.
It's not, but it's still goddamn good.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, that's a very popular one, and that seems to be one that people, like I said, everybody just... I think the problem with 98, though, is that people only really look at that kind of main event scope. Mm-hmm. The Austin stuff, the feud with The Rock, and everything was great. It really was. It still holds up as some of the best stuff that's ever happened. But the stuff...
What else was going on the card?
The stuff below it, man.
Yeah.
Was...
You got a problem with Gangrel and D'Lo Brown?
That's not even what I have a problem with, because those guys were both good workers.
Yeah.
It was just the thing of, like, it's one of those things where you open up like a trunk full of stuff that you kept that you like had in your room when you were like 15 years old, mm-hmm. and you look at some of the stuff and you go like, oh yeah, I remember that. Oh, that's awesome. And then you look at some of the other stuff and go,
what was I thinking?
Jesus, I was into that when I was, ugh.
You get the awkward feel.
Yeah,
just like,
that's it too. And not only that, but like 1998, I think gets, and you can point the fucking social justice, the SJW finger at me or whatever. But I think 1998 gets automatically disqualified for the fact that 50% of your potential audience was looked at as an object. 1998 was an awful time for women in wrestling. Mm-hmm. It was embarrassing, literally to the point where I cannot go back and watch that stuff. Even stuff from like ECW and things like that, stuff that seemed so cool at the time. Like I go back and I try and watch it with my wife. Not even with my wife. I try and go back and just watch it sitting in a living room by myself, and I go, oh fuck, and fast forward.
Oh, come on. You had China managed by China's nose, okay? So
it's just like like the Sable stuff and everything. Actually, China was was the best thing that they were doing with women in wrestling.
I know.
At the time. She was the pinnacle of what it was. Yeah. And it's just to think of how many bridges were burned with female audiences during that time, that it had just scorched the earth to the point where, like I said, I'm lucky that my wife does like pro wrestling, and she did watch it during that time, despite the really terrible way that her gender was represented. But just like how many dates I've gone on, or female friends I've had, or ex-girlfriends who are just like you watch professional wrestling, like that shit, and then boom, it's done. Like
you're done.
The 1998 was great, and it delivered some great stuff for a wrestling fan. But if you were like just on the outside looking in, it was a car crash, man.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think it was Danielle Matheson on Uprocks. She wrote the article about how everybody remembers the Rocks promos and how great they were, but she remembers how they degraded women.
Oh yeah, absolutely,
and how they made her feel as a young girl who liked to watch wrestling.
Yeah,
and that is terrible. That's not something that we should ever be proud of. But here's people go, 98, it was great. Oh, parts of it were.
Yeah,
you can't say this was the best year.
Yeah,
based on I liked this match, except you're him. In which case, you could say this was the best year based on this match.
But that's fine, and that's still fine.
You can. Anybody is entitled to their opinion. Now, to have Paul kicked off a message board because he doesn't like 1998 or whatever, that's completely different.
Yeah. Well, that was another thing is that there's also you have the people who have kind of like the hard line. The one that I specifically got into the argument over was, like I said, there was a guy who picked 1992 as his favorite year. Okay, which, like I said, immediately if you're somebody who's watched wrestling for a long time, you go, huh?
Ric Flair.
Yeah. And the guy's response was like, that was before pro wrestling became sports entertainment and WWF just kind of became awful. And you know what? I can't argue that. Fine. I get that's fine. If you don't like that stuff, that's okay. But that style of wrestling, that hard-nosed style, did not die in 92. It's still alive today, and it's been there every year in between. So I think that's the problem, is that when people hear best year, they just immediately think of what was the best thing they saw, and not what was the best thing for the sport overall. And that's why both you and I picked 2015, is that it's something for everybody that not just I'm going to enjoy. I'm going to watch, as much as I love professional wrestling, I'm going to watch 3% of what's out there, maybe. Yeah. It's such a small thing, but the fact is that there is something for literally everybody now. For men, for women, the attitudes for gay people, for trans people, getting better. It's still not great, but getting there.
The midgets have hornswoggle? Not anymore, though.
Well, even for you make that comment, but Masquerita Sagrada.
Yeah, no, I do.
And Lucha Underground.
There are actually full-on midget companies too. That was another one I was thinking about adding in when we were saying every company has something. There is
something for everybody, and there is still stuff. There is still stuff to this day that you can look at and go, "Oh God, that's gross," or especially if you want to dig around in the independent scene. You're definitely going to find local stuff or regional stuff that you're going to look at and go, that's embarrassing. But for every time you have that experience, you're going to have at a 1-to-1 ratio or better a promotion you're going to look at and you're going to go, that's incredible. Despite the fact that I've been watching this for 20, 30 years, I've never seen that before in my life. So that's what I think makes this year this special.
Of course. I can't. Well, I'm clearly not going to disagree with you because I picked the same year. So, no, fuck your opinions, sir.
Also my opinions. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to wrap it up for this episode. We want to know what you think. What do you think the best wrestling was? In which year? That didn't work. What do you think the best year in wrestling was and why? Be sure to send us some feedback. You can email us at changingthequestions@gmail.com. You can check us out on Twitter at changingtheqs. That's at changingtheqs. You can also search for us on Facebook and YouTube. If you're watching this on YouTube right now, be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to subscribe to us. Leave a nice comment in the comments below. All that stuff helps us get seen a little bit more. Also, if you're listening to this on iTunes, be sure to leave a 5-star review, say a few nice words about us. Guys, if they want to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
At the Wolf CJ Scott on Twitter and the Wolf CJ Scott on Facebook.
At Savage Ravage 13 on Twitter and the Salmon Man, Super Damon Ravage guy. The Savage Damon Ravage official fan page on Facebook, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to wrap it up for us. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you again soon.
Well, one of us will.
Hopefully.
Bye.
Bye.